Hello and welcome to another edition of Razorwire. Now today we're actually talking about something a little bit different. We're actually talking about that whole psychological element of defense in depth. We talk a lot about security technology, we talk about policies, we talk about procedures, and it's universally understood that there is a element in people. And a lot of people just use the kind of security awareness training for that people element, maybe obviously sort of security professionals. But there's a whole other area within this space that we need to consider. Some of that is this kind of like awareness thing. Some of it is about culture. And some of it is about kind of not vilifying people if they get things wrong or if there's a false positive. And making them feel bad about that kind of thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of explore with two of my favorite psychologists the element of defense in depth from a psychological perspective. So please feel free to sit down, drink a cup of coffee, and listen in on this fantastic conversation. And today, in order to discuss the wonderful theme of psychological defense within information security, I have the indomitable Lisa and Beck. Lisa, introduce yourself to the people out there if they haven't seen you on the various different media channels that you seem to be quite prevalent on.
Hi, Jim. It's a pleasure to be here today. So I'm Lisa. I'm the founder of Cybersecurity Unity, and I also do a lot of work in the cybersecurity awareness and culture change arena and have a huge interest in the human elements of cybersecurity and cyber psychology.
And Beck?
Hi, I'm Bec McKeown, founder of Mind Science, and I have a background in psychology, working particularly in high-risk industries or high-risk, high-stakes industries such as aviation and Ministry of Defence. And my reason for being is to bring all of that knowledge about how people behave in difficult situations into the cybersecurity forum, because I think that underneath the surface, it's just as volatile and chaotic in cybersecurity as it can be in defence.
Yeah, psychological elements. So one of the things that you hear a lot about in a lot of kind of different information security forums is there is, people, process, and technology. Now, the process we're pretty good at these days. I mean, people still balls it up, but, it's there. The technology, well, we've got more technology now today than we did 10 years ago when it comes to securing environments and so on and so forth. And then we come to the people. And I've seen quite a big trend at the moment where organizations are starting to look at what can we do to make security work within our organizations, because they've been doing security awareness training for a long time now. It's come out with mixed results. And there's all kinds of organizations who are starting to pop up now that are bringing up the human intelligence aspect of defense in depth. And I think it's an important one that we should be looking at, and we should be looking at a little bit more in depth, because, when you look at a lot of the breaches that have occurred in recent times, a lot of the time it's somebody clicking on something they shouldn't have, or an internal threat agent selling, information to access brokers. There's accounts of people being a bit too militant as well with their requirements for security training. We were just talking off camera. I was chatting to somebody who mentioned that a nurse with 25 years worth of training as a nurse over in the States was fired because she'd failed her phishing training 3 times. So you're vilifying somebody who's potentially a very good resource for the organization, for what your organization is there to do, if you're a hospital or something like that, solely because they can't get to grips with how phishing works. And we can't vilify people for that, in my opinion, personally, because it's not their discipline. And I must admit, I got a fish the other day. I spotted it, but it's getting so much harder to spot, even for a professional now. I had to really read through it and think, no, this is something not right here. This is not from my accountant. It looks like it's from my accountant, but it really isn't. Where are we at the moment, in your opinion, when it comes to that people element and the psychological element of protecting our organisations and our key data streams?
You're absolutely right in that we're seeing a lot more sophistication going into these phishing email attempts. And I can certainly talk from the point of view of I'm doing some cybersecurity and awareness training work with a large global software testing organisation. And they've been through various rounds of investment funding. And whenever there's an announcement about some investment funding, that's when the CEO fraud or the CFO fraud stuff really ramps up. And people have been caught out by that a lot, thinking that they're getting an email from Anbu, who's the CEO. Can you transfer this payment for me? I need you to do it really quickly. So there's always that sense of urgency around it, and people being really busy. They think it's him, or they think it's the chief financial officer. Lo and behold, they've transferred a payment, or they've got a gift card, or they've done something around it. And I think as well, I agree with you around not vilifying anybody that does fail those phishing email simulations times. So, like you said, they're not in our world. They don't have cyber on their radar in the same way that we do. Day after day, night after night, and so on. And I really don't think it's the right thing to do to vilify those people that do click on those links and fail those tests. But you saw as well that the sophistication of them are growing, exponentially. Some of the traditional advice around, looking for grammar, looking at the way it's constructed, and so on. If they're using things like ChatGPT to craft them, there's an art in being able to determine whether it's AI generated, and perhaps UI or anybody else listening to this may be able to do that. But the average person may read it. That those traditional things in there, aren't there. They might think it's genuine. So that's just my on it.
But I also think that there's a bit of a wider angle that needs to be taken from this. And it's not just about what's going on in the organisation in terms of cybersecurity. What is the overall culture like of the organisation? If people are under pressure to hit deadlines, then they haven't got the capacity to start doing thinking, because they're banging through the jobs because they've got a lot to do, and if they don't get it done, there's consequences. So that is where the human engineering comes in. It's not just from the fact that people don't necessarily understand psychology. There are other things going in. We all know, for example, that if it's leading up to a bank holiday, everybody in the UK knows that bank holiday means we've got a Monday off work, so Friday afternoon our mind is not on the job. It's on getting through that task list to get out the door and go off and enjoy your bank holiday weekend. So
go down the pub.
I think it's, it's about the bigger system as well. And also you're thinking about the security of the organisation. If people are constantly told off for not doing things in the right way, whether that's cybersecurity training or otherwise, they're never going to fess up to it. They're never going to admit as to what's going on. There'll always be an excuse. And I think that if you haven't got that psychological safety within the culture, then a lot of these things are probably more likely to happen, because it's not in the person's best interest to hold their hand up and go, do you know what? I don't understand this, because they're thinking of the consequences if they do that. So I think that it's about, as with most things to do with psychology, it's about lots of different aspects and not just one.
Yeah, I mean, I must just say, a lot of organisations I go to see, because I'm an auditor, I go and see a lot of different organisations, and I have done over the years. I do less auditing now. They do a lot of, as I said before, they do a lot of the technological side, they do a lot of the policies and procedural side, but the people side is very, very weak, and they don't have like a reward system, for instance. One of the best places I saw had a reward system. If you did your training and you got good results, if you'd found a potential phishing thing and you reported it and you got someone to check it, if you'd spotted something going on in the organisation that looked a little bit iffy and reported it, then, you got like a point system. And then at the end of a period of time, you could go in and you could choose a set of kind of rewards. So extra holiday, maybe a few bits and bobs, bit of tech or whatever. And it was well done. I mean, they did have to police it, because when people figured out that, they got point systems for pointing out a phishing thing, there was a lot of people saying, "Oh, this looks like phishing," and it really wasn't. It was just a bit of spam that come through. But it added that positive reinforcement to the security program that they were doing that you don't see in a lot of organizations. I think a lot of organizations suffer from, various different biases. And I'm not the psychologist here. Both of you are the best people to speak about this. But there's a lot of confirmation bias in organizations where, people are focusing on threats they know about. They're not necessarily looking for threats that they haven't come across before. There's an overconfidence bias from a management team perspective as well, because they're saying, well, we've got all these technological protocols, products in place, and we've got our policies and we've got our procedures. Everybody should know them. So we're fine, we're perfect. And then, of course, they get hit with a cybersecurity event. Not mentioning anybody recently who may have been pretty confident about their security, but then end up in the media with a particularly large breach that recently occurred. If you like going on trains or undergrounds in large cities that may or may not be in the country that we're in. What are you guys finding from with the people that you interact with and the CISOs that you talk to? Are they concerned about this? Is it something that they've been concerned about for a while? Or is it something that's just started to come up with realization that, malicious actors are crafting attacks? And you mentioned this, Lisa, very, very well. It was very apt. They're crafting attacks very carefully now. They're also doing a lot of research into the organizations they're attacking. They have a lot more capability now, rather than the kind of shotgun spread approach of just firing into the dark and hoping you're going to hit something. There's a lot more targeted stuff. As you said, if the seed funding stuff is coming up in the media, all of a sudden you'll see a lot of whaling happening. You'll see people are targeting key people. They're doing their homework. What are CISOs saying to you guys, or management? Let's face it.
I think certainly one of the most interesting things that I've been talking to people about, and obviously as a psychologist, I've got a natural interest in the people side of things, is that there's an awful lot of technology. We've got even more technology than we had 10 years ago, but it's still happening.
Yeah.
What's going on? And I think that for me is the topic of conversation that we perhaps need to dig into a little bit more. Because if people are starting to notice that, all the singing, the dancing and everything else that you have with technology, the shiny gadgets, and the situation isn't getting any better. It's still on the increase. So what is going on? And that is the conversation that I tend to find, certainly over the last sort of 6 months or so, has been the conversation that I've had.
Yeah, completely agree with that, Bex. And also just taking it a step up, while the Crowdstrike outage was not strictly speaking a cyber attack, it was, of course, a great insight into that technology when it goes wrong and the repercussions and what can happen. And we also sort of healthcare, all manner of different airports, flights, grounded, all sorts of stuff. It was just insane. And while strictly speaking, it wasn't a cyber attack, it was a great thing to see of when the technology goes wrong, or that update that was rolled out that broke thing, that was the result. And also a great thing to say, not a cyber attack, but if there was a cyber attack that could take out a lot of the CNI, that's a great example of what could happen.
Yeah. There's been quite a lot of research done in aviation over quite a long time about trust in automation. And I wonder if there's something there that it's become very easy to automate. We automate the things that we don't need to be involved in. But if you take the human out of the loop, where's your situational awareness? Where's your ability to spot an issue that might not be? It's a bit like spell check, isn't it? or a grammar check on your computer. If you've spelled a word right, but it's the wrong word in the sentence, it's not going to pick it up. So I guess there's something else going on there. I think maybe I'm not the tech expert, but is there a thing that we're overly trusting in automation? We've taken the human out of the loop too far. And I ask that as a question. I don't have the answer for that.
The Crowdstrike thing, I mean, that was, obviously I don't know the intricate details of it. I know what the outcome was, and I saw, what the fixes were and all the rest of it. But for me, fundamentally, that was a failure in process. That was somebody failing to do the what they should have been doing, which is testing, set updates on a number of different sort of platforms before rolling it out. I mean, it's not like it was just a small subset of systems that under specific, builds suddenly fell over. I mean, it was everything that had it was everything that had this particular update because it was a particular file in Windows. I mean, as I said, it wasn't because there was one particular application that was installed that made it fall over. And psychologically speaking, I'd hate to have been the person that did the release on that, I'll be honest.
Yeah. But then you see, you hate to be the person who did the release on that, because the consequences, the whole shame blame thing is going to come piling down on that. Has anybody asked why? Why did that happen? What was the set of circumstances that led up to that? And I always go back to Reason's cheese model of accident causation. Is, that might have, the single point of failure there might have been somebody not following a process, but there were a set of antecedent things that led up to that. And that, to me, is about, when we're looking at incidents and things that happen, it's not just about trying to find somebody to blame. It's looking way back at all the circumstances that led up to that.
Yeah.
So there was somebody being rushed. Why were they being rushed? Because there was a management edict that said X, Y, and Z. Why is that? Because the organisation is under pressure and they've got to make more money. Shareholders to answer to, and there's a knock-on effect. So I think it's really quite interesting to look at things like that. And I kind of wish there was some sort of a cybersecurity version of the Air Accident Investigation Branch, because I think that if there was a common way of looking at all of these incidents and spotting out what all of those antecedent things were, there might be something going on there that you could pick up on that would sort of suggest that it's not just the tech that can help, but there's something else going on around the organisation and the culture that is possibly also a contributing factor.
We're talking about kind of culture and all the rest. What about the information security people themselves? How do they protect themselves? I mean, let's be honest. We're talking about finger pointing with the individuals who got caught out with releasing that thing, and I'm sure they got nailed to the wall quite significantly. But when it comes to infosec, one of the things that I've seen a lot of, and I got a lot of DMs after we did the interview with Yanya about burnout. And one of the biggest problems that the CISOs were saying is, I don't get any respite.
Yeah.
I'm constantly on. My team are constantly worried about something happening. We're doing everything that we can, but our security is being hampered by the fact that we're all exhausted, and we know full well if something hits the fan, which it will do at some point, because it will always do, immediately the finger pointing starts. What's your opinion on that? And what have you heard from people? Because I know, Lisa, you speak to a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Beck, you speak to a lot of people. And Yanya, I spoke to her recently, actually, and she said she'd been getting tons of DMs after that piece of content and her TED Talk. What do you think of that?
Conversation I had on Wednesday with the exec steering group of the mental health and cybersecurity team. We had a strategy day on Wednesday down in London, and we were talking about this very thing. And it's about building resilience into the cybersecurity incident response teams and procedures, because everybody knows that that whoever's on that team during an incident is going to be on it 24/7. So how can you implement a shift system? That makes it sound very simple, and actually I do understand it's not. But we know that it's going to be a heavy workload. And it's not just going to be for a couple of days, it is going to be over weeks. And if we know that, what can we do then to put something into place to support those people, to support their families? Because the families are going to have, are going to suffer as well if the person who's on the team is away all week. So is it about, well, I think it is, it's about actually, if we know that's going to happen, how can we best prepare for that in advance? And I appreciate that's going to be far more difficult for smaller organisations who don't have massive teams, but that doesn't mean it can't be done. Lisa, is this something that you've come across?
Absolutely. And I would argue as well of trying to remove that, what I call sort of fear factor. Like you said, they're on, call all the time, 24/7. They don't feel they get a break and so on. And that leads to a massive amount of stress and burnout, I think, which in turn can then lead to things happening because of that burnout, because of just not being 100%. With it at all times. So I think as well, removing some of that sort of fear around it. And I think also not just CISOs, but, across the board of, people are afraid of their jobs if they fail the phishing email simulations or if they fail the cybersecurity awareness, training. And there needs to be a culture in organizations of removing that fear and being open and transparent about not losing your jobs. And the example that you gave earlier about the nurse, I hope is more the exception than the rule. But that's what I would like to see more of. If somebody does click on something by mistake, if somebody does something by mistake, that they feel that they can report it straight away, rather than just sort of, oh, I've done something, I better not say anything, by which time it's too late. So that's definitely something I would like to see in more organisations.
Yeah, I think there does need to be a supportive program. It's interesting, some of the institutions you mentioned, actually, Beck, this has obviously gone on the radar of a number of people. I mean, what are these institutions saying? You mentioned the Psychological Information Security Support or something?
Cybersecurity, Mental Health and Cybersecurity Foundation.
Ah, right. I'll be looking those guys up, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask if I could do a plug anyway at some point, and Lisa is involved with it too. And it came out from Saab Semby, Pete Olivier and Paul Sims, and they had conversations a couple of years ago, and it's very, very apparent that there is an issue with burnout. And they sort of decided, well, actually, they're going to write a report. Something needs to be done about this. And then Saab says, we wrote the report, and then the world just didn't change overnight, and we thought it would. So what happens next? Well, we build a foundation, and we start to bring those people together. But what we're trying to achieve is to do that, but not in a negative, let's all have a moan way. There is a certain element of that because you need, social support around when you're dealing with all of these problems. But actually, what are people doing about it, and what best practice can be shared? So even at a small team level, you can have an impact on the people around you, even if you're not working within an organisation that wants to invest in the resources to achieve that across the whole organisation. It's what can you do to support each other and support your peers? And to me, the conversations that I've seen happen in the rooms when we've had workshops and that sort of thing are very invaluable, because there's some organisations that bang on it and they have a lot to share, not just about what works, but the difficulties they had in putting these things into practice. So for me, it's why I'm involved, because I think it's wonderful to have somewhere where you can go and speak about those things in that safe environment.
I'm definitely going to check that out. See if we can do a piece on that.
Yeah,
actually, because I think it's important. It's like, as I said, I talk to a lot of people at different levels on different teams. Parts of audits and all the rest of it, and the overall level of stress I see in this industry is just ridiculous.
Yeah.
Do you feel that organisations, C-suites, need to get better at supporting the security function throughout the organisation? Because we see a lot of, you're the infosec person, so just go and sort out some tech.
Yeah, just go and infosec.
Yeah, go and do your infosec stuff. And the only time you ever really get to be a rock star is if you sort an incident out, but then obviously the finger pointing happens afterwards, and that's when things sometimes start to fall apart. Where do you think organisations are generally around sort of like UK, Europe, maybe North America? I don't know how far you guys kind of go when it comes to the work that you do. Are they supportive? Are they not supportive? Are they still not getting it? Are they, is there a lot of education that needs to occur? Because if you've got a happy information security team with a good program of awareness, with a good, maybe a rewards program as well, an interaction between the staff and the information security teams that is positive. Because I'll be honest, I've been called all kinds of things over the years when I was working as a CISO or in charge of security before CISOs were a thing. I was called a glorified security guard.
Wow.
I was called all kinds of things, kept out of meetings just in case I wanted to do something terrible, like, do a pen test of the web app they were building before it went live, just to make sure that it wasn't going to get compromised. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think companies are really they don't care, or they're trying to?
So with the larger organizations and enterprises, I'd say from my experience, it's probably around about a 50-50 split. Some are fantastic with support programs and supporting their staff, and others are woefully inadequate at it. But where there's an issue for me is around the sort of the smaller businesses, and even some of the SMEs, out there, that just don't even see cybersecurity on their radar, let alone, supporting that stuff. We're 2024. It's in the news all the time with different, breaches and cyber incidents and what have you. And still, I talk to organizations and they'll go, we're too small to be a target. We don't need to even worry about it. And I swear this is absolutely true. And I just think, what planet are you on? We're 2024. Let's hypothetically say that we all know it's not true, but let's hypothetically say, okay, they are small, so they're not going to be targeted. What about their supply chains? How can they be sure that their supply chains are as secure as they can be? So I think it's forgetting the support side. I think even just getting cyber and infosec on board with other organizations is still a challenge even now.
DORA may change that in Europe. Obviously DORA's, if you're a financial institution or a supplier to the financial kind of sector out there, there's going to be some real serious consequences if you don't handle security, significant fines, potential jail time for C-suites who just don't take it seriously. And I can tell you all kinds of stories about C-suites who should take this kind of thing seriously that don't. Do you think that it's going to take legislation to change that mindset and thus by proxy change the way that we handle security within the organisation from a staff level and from a supportive level for infosec people? Or do you think that we've got to hit something else? Is there something else we're not doing?
I think legislation will go a bit of a way further for it. And I would also argue as well, Cyber Essentials, while not perfect, is out there and it's available. And I think all businesses, no matter what size, should at least minimum be Cyber Essentials or Cyber Essentials Plus certified. But there just doesn't seem to be that appetite for it, or that we need to do it. So maybe that legislation is the answer. Maybe if all businesses, when this, and I've argued as well of cascading that information through Companies House whenever a limited company is set up, but that doesn't get to all the small, the sole traders and organizations like that, or partnerships. But I would argue that having something like Cyber Essentials, even if it's not 100% perfect, it's better than nothing. It's a start, and all organizations, sole traders, no matter what size, should be Cyber Essentials certified minimum.
It'd be great to see that if it was part of becoming a limited or
absolutely.
Yeah. I have to be, because I'm a supplier to MOD, for example. So you kind of have to go through that as part of the process of onboarding with them. And I think that legislation isn't the answer to everything, but it kind of focuses the attention. If you have to comply with something for legislation, even if you just totally not interested in cybersecurity, it's going to come onto your radar because you've got to tick that box. Even if it only is a tick box, it still might be a step in the right direction of acknowledging that that's a thing. And for me, then that sort of puts the psychology of it even further down the line, because once you've got cybersecurity becomes an awareness thing, then you've got that thing about, oh, it's a tool. Let's buy some things and that will solve all of the problems. So it's a long old way off being perfect, but then nothing ever is perfect, but I think it's just a case of, as the years go by, things are improving. And I don't know if you can actually do anything to speed that up.
Yeah.
I think, you look at the stuff that's happened within aviation. Well, they've been doing the human factors and the psychological safety thing for donkey's years. But now, under pressure, there is another aircraft manufacturer earlier on this year had issues whereby they had problems, where the systems and the processes they have in place had caused serious problems with the aircraft. So, they've been doing it for years. So I think that it's about managing expectations as well as to what is possible. And what's doable.
I mean, we're into our last kind of short period of time before the end. I mean, what's the future of psychology and cybersecurity in an ideal kind of situation? If a CISO, we got a lot of CISOs, a lot of business owners also, funnily enough, I found out recently who watch this. I get some interesting DMs. What do you think needs to happen to ensure not only the protection of the organisation and raising awareness, but also protecting psychologically those people from having meltdowns, burnouts, and a situation where it's going to have a very, very detrimental effect on them? What do you think needs to occur? I mean, obviously, as you say, in smaller companies, things like this are really hard because you've only got 1 or 2 people or 5 people or the rest of it. But if you're kind of a mid-sized company up where you do have a bit of budget and you do have a bit of time and effort, what would you recommend?
I think it's something that Yania first said when I met her, and that's actually to start looking at a burnout from a risk management perspective. Because it's a completely different lifetime. This is not just about fluffy well-being. This has an impact on the risk management and the resilience of your organisation.
Shouldn't you be doing that with all your kind of high-end sort of C-suite executives? Because I mean, the financial director, for instance, I'm guessing will have a similar kind of problem with burnout. I know CEOs, I know MDs do, and entrepreneurs. But I mean, is it something existential that we could look at from an infosec perspective of, well, actually, and this has just popped into my head, we look for single points of failures. Why don't we look at things like the psychological well-being of people who are a single point of failure? You've only got 1 finance director. You don't tend to have 2. Is there succession planning within the team? What happens if something happens to that director? What if they just can't cope one day and shut down or go on sabbatical? Because that could have a real serious security effect as well. It's a bit of a borderline one.
I would love to see more resources going into supporting people throughout the organisation, as well as the C-suite and infosec people. And there are a lot of organisations that are very good at talking the talk, but walking the walk, no, they don't. And I see a lot of that going on. Organisations that say they support their staff, that they roll out that awareness training, and they really don't. But they're very vocal about, hey, we're doing all this, and I'm just like, no, you're not. So I would love to see that change, and I would love to see the culture within organisations change to supporting the employees that they've got. But where it falls down, I think, is especially on these large organisations that do have shareholders that they have to be beholden to, that it's all about the profit and the money and so on, and it's all about people who are very much expendable across all levels. And I've seen as well, even Cisco this week, huge amounts of job losses. There's cuts, everywhere, across the board in tech, in cyber, and all. You could argue that with that, the skills gap will close with a lot more talent coming onto the market. I'm not sure that it necessarily will.
Yeah, and I mean that. I was talking to somebody else the other day, and we were, funny enough, we were talking about the CISO, the CISO announcement, Cisco announcement, and we were, he was saying, if I was a CISO of that company, I'd be a bit concerned. Because that's a massive amount of layoffs, and when people get laid off, people aren't always in the best of mindsets.
Correct.
And the possibility of somebody selling information, grabbing information, doing a bit of data theft is significantly higher. Does that mean we should start doing psychological profiling of our organizations from a security perspective?
No, mate, cringe when I hear that. No. I guess see the point of it, but I don't think that people appreciate the nuances of psychological profile and what it can and can't do. And I see a lot of, can I have a risk score attributed to a particular person around their cybersecurity thing? Well, what are you going to do with that risk score? It goes back to these metrics that matter. If somebody's got a high risk score, what does that mean? Are you going to sack them? Are you just going to give them more training, which is not always the answer? And I think that it's a lot more subtle and nuanced than attributing a risk score. There's a whole load of why behind it that you don't necessarily get.
I'm just thinking, especially on high value targets, as we talked about whaling before, financial institutions get hit time and time and time of the financial institutions, financial departments. I mean, even my own. People are constantly trying to get my finance team to click on links and sending them all kinds of stuff to open up and so on and so forth. And we get all of it. Luckily, they're very well trained, being the fact they're part of an information security company. I would hope they would. But, it is quite a significant danger. And we have put in, for instance, situations with organizations where we've identified those high-end targets that are likely to be, targeted more significantly than others, and have added layers of additional security on top, maybe a bit more email security, a bit more training. It's just that profile of who they are means they're going to be a higher level of targeting.
Yeah, and I think that's really wise at an organisational level, and that's tailored to each organisation, which is exactly what training should be to be more effective. I think for me, it's just more of a case of if we're starting to use data to go down to the individual level, pluck out people we consider to be in risk based on data alone with no context, that is problematic.
Yeah.
She said, ending the note on a bit of a
rampant psychological profiling of everybody in the company. God, could you imagine how bad that would be? There'd be a lot of very paranoid and worried people, wouldn't there?
Yeah. One burnout, everybody would be wrecked, wouldn't they? So I think
I mean, it's a good point, though. It's just like, there is a point where the security training and the security messaging and so on. I mean, you see it I know that Lisa likes films similar to the ones that I like, especially dystopian ones, where you've kind of got all the security messaging of obey and do this and do that. And it kind of takes it the other direction as well. You've got to get this really good balance of training and not going overboard, because otherwise people feel that they're constantly being reviewed, checked, balanced. And especially at the moment, I mean, all this stuff with people returning to work, I've seen a lot of weird differences of opinion on, the whole, I don't want to go back to work. I don't want to, but I also don't want additional monitoring for what I'm doing when I'm at home. It's like, well, you can't have both.
Yeah. There's conversations around the zero trust thing as well, though, isn't it? And it's about having that to a certain extent. But to me, it's about having the conversations with people before you implement a system on them, engage with, find out why they need access, or why if access is removed, why that will be difficult, because there could be a way around it. But it's about having those two-way user-centered design style conversations rather than just assuming zero trust with everybody and causing and creating friction between the cybersecurity teams and everybody else.
Yes, because we all know what happens when you get friction between the cybersecurity team and everybody else. It really doesn't go very well.
Yeah, you get kept out of meetings, eh, Jim?
Oh yes.
Which
I
is
mean,
no good.
yeah, the world has changed. Luckily, it's a lot nicer nowadays. You get a much different response these days when you walk into the room as infosec. Yeah, every now and then you come across somebody who's a bit old school. But no, this is interesting, and I think this is an interesting element we need to watch going forward. And I mean, we've hit the top end of our time now together, which I'm sure everybody's very unhappy about.
I like the information.
Beck, you mentioned that you wanted to get a plug in. You did a little plug earlier on. Do you want to do a real plug for this institution of yours?
Yes, the Mental Health in Cybersecurity Foundation, coming up for our first anniversary of being in existence in October. If you put Mental Health in Cybersecurity Foundation into the search bar in LinkedIn, you will find a group that you can join. Or if you get in touch with me, I can certainly send you details and add you into the group. And we also have a community of practice, of which Lisa is one of the members. And the idea of building a community is so we can learn to support each other, pass on best practice, what works, what doesn't, and the barriers and enablers to implementing it within organisations. So the more people that join us, the bigger the conversations we can have and the more that we can share. So yes, if anybody's interested, please get in touch.
Fantastic. Is there a website to go to as well, or is that in progress?
There is a website. It's not quite ready yet. I'll point you to the LinkedIn group, and everything that you could probably need to know is in there.
Fantastic. So, we'll put a description and a link into the description of this video as well, if we can. Thank you ever so much for sitting down and discussing this with us. I think it's an important piece that we're going to probably be covering in various different ways over time and revisiting on a regular basis. So thank you to my guests for sitting and discussing this important aspect of protective psychology in organizations and with information security teams. Thank you to all of you out there for sort of sitting, watching this podcast. We deliver all kinds of content all the time. It's great to see the DMs and great to get the comments back on the fact that we're hitting a lot of sort of really good subject matters that people are finding really, really interesting. If there is anything you want us to deep dive into, or there's anything else that you want us to cover, then please feel free to get in touch with us via LinkedIn or the various different sort of methods. DM seems to be the most popular one. And we'd be more than happy to kind of sit down, have a look at it and add it into the roster of various things that we talk about. And seemingly psychology seems to be one of the bigger ones at the moment. So we'll see what we can do with additional content for you.
And thank you for listening or even watching the latest edition of Razorwire. It's always good to get feedback. Please feel free to reach out to us. You can reach out to us via LinkedIn or through our website, www.razorthorn.com. If you feel that there's something that we should cover maybe a little bit more in depth, a new topic or something of interest to you or the community at large. We'll even do interviews. If you've got any recommendations or you want us to interview people, we'll reach out to those individuals and see if we can get them on camera so we can ask them the important questions about infosec. So it'd be great to see what your feedback is. In addition, I do have a book recently come out, the Cyber Sentinels Handbook, a primer for information security professionals. Now, this book is very much geared up towards professionals at all levels of their career, be they starters, be they newcomers, be they people who've been in it for a little while and maybe looking for a little bit more direction, albeit the older ones looking to maybe reground themselves in some of the more important aspects of the trade that maybe they've forgotten over time. I've had lots of good feedback from a lot of different readers of a lot of different levels, so please feel free to get yourselves a copy. We've got the e-copy, we've also got the paperback copy, and if you don't want to spend any money, you can go on Kindle Unlimited and read the book for free there as well. So thank you ever so much again. Look after yourselves, and we'll be seeing you again soon.